Welcome to Reading and Writing Between the Lines, a podcast series about communication skills in the workplace. I'm your host, John Witzman. Join me as I speak with industry professionals and Conestoga faculty and alumni to explore their journeys with reading and writing skills. Follow us as we talk about how communications learning has changed over the years, how these skills are used in a wide range of industries, and the future of workplace communications. I'd love to go back in time and take you back to some of your early experiences learning communication skills at school. What were those early experiences like for you?
Well, it's interesting because I do think they weren't as people might expect. I've spent my whole career with writers and editors, and they all tell a similar story that I think is a bit different than mine because I was never a language kid.
Right.
I wasn't the writer in school.
So for the writers and editors that you work with, it was an instantaneous click.
Well, yeah, they were just sort of, they wrote stories. They were just sort of, so-and-so, he's a writer, she's a writer. And
that's how they identified.
I was never, I don't think anyone sort of singled me out as being a writer. Like I was, a high achieving kid. I was in the gifted program, but I never stood out as a writer. And I was thinking about why, and I think there's three main things. I had terrible penmanship, like stay in at recess and work on your penmanship.
Okay.
I was a terrible speller. Failed my. I didn't fail spelling tests, but I've never been a speller.
Yeah.
Never been good at spelling. Still can't spell very well. Thank you, computers. And I also just wasn't a storyteller. And I think when kids sort of stand out as being writers,
right, it's
because they write stories.
Right.
And I'm not a creative writer. So I was never sort of categorized as a writer as a young student.
There's so much there in that answer that you just gave that I think is really significant to the work that we're doing here on this podcast, and then also the work that we're doing at the post-secondary level in our communications courses around simply defining what are the skills that make up this field, what are the standards and criteria for success or for effective application of these skills.
Sure.
And it's so interesting to hear you describe a background where there was a fairly rigid definition of what it meant to be skilled in this area, right? We need it to look pretty, for lack of a better word, right? That there's an aesthetic quality to our output. We need to conform to standards in the case of spelling, and then also we're going to prioritize a certain kind of writing, a certain kind of communication, specifically creative writing, storytelling,
sure.
and in so doing, we're going to maybe miss a lot of aptitude and ability in the very many other ways that people communicate in writing.
Sure. Well, it was just, it wasn't a thing I did. And I often got sort of pegged by teachers as not living up to my potential.
Right.
But my parents, who were educators themselves,
right,
they weren't concerned. They're like, she will eventually.
Okay.
And when it gets interesting, she'll live up to her potential, I think was their perspective. They're like, it's fine. She's doing fine. We're not worried about it.
That sounds like really sage advice.
Yes.
And that marks the end of another episode of Reading and Writing Between the Lines, a podcast hosted by me, John Witzman, on behalf of the Communications Department and School of Interdisciplinary Studies at Conestoga College. You can find other episodes of this series on our YouTube channel, Reading and Writing Between the Lines. Stay tuned for more episodes. Thanks for listening.